What if you could help others to find the power to heal themselves? Physically, emotionally, and spiritually.
When I started teaching my classes, it was in 2002, and I was just doing the past life regressions and contacting the subconscious part. But then as the time went on and we found how powerful this was and what we could do with it, a lot of the students began saying, you know, advanced past life regression doesn't really tell what it's all about. This is so much more than that. We think you should change the name. So it was a few years ago we decided to change the name to Quantum Healing Hypnosis Technique. And this is the healing technique that we've now been teaching it, well, since 2002, that's 12 years.
What if you could time travel with them? Visit mythical places or angelic realms, other worlds, other galaxies. Help others to speak to their higher selves. You can. Dolores has taught thousands of people from across the world how to use QHHT, and now you can learn her method by going directly to dolorescannon.com. And don't forget to mention the discount code MORETALKS.
Established over 100 years ago, Watkins Books is one of the world's oldest and leading independent bookshops specializing in esoterica. We have the widest selection of esoteric books in the UK, and our friendly and knowledgeable staff are here to assist you in a unique ambience of our shop. So come and visit us in the heart of London as we're open every day.
Does your book, film, resource, product, or business change people's lives for the better? Hi, I'm Jackie Lappin, founder of Conscious Media Relations, a unique boutique PR firm that helps you connect with your mind, body, spirit, and conscious lifestyle audience in a big way. We reach 3,500 specialty media and all the key mainstream outlets in the United States. I invite you to explore our radio media tour that connects to 2,600 personal growth radio shows. There is just nothing else like it. Come check out our website and read our rave reviews.
The comments and views expressed on The More Show are those of the people that make them and do not necessarily reflect the view of Kevin Moore, The More Show, or this radio station and its affiliate or sponsors. This show is for entertainment purposes only.
Broadcasting from the UK and across the world online. You're now watching the UK's only alternative late night talk show. And I'm your host, Kevin Moore. For the next hour, I'll be covering subjects that will open up your mind and provide you with information you may have never heard before. On today's show, I'm joined with Ronald Chapman, who has followed many paths of spiritual and religious study over the past 20 years. Now, based on his personal and professional experiences and research, he created the Seeing True transformational philosophy, which has helped thousands of people to clearly identify inner obstructions that impede success. His Seeing True approach to dispelling illusions and achieving clarity helps businesses and organizations as well as individuals. Now, an inspirational and motivational speaker, Chapman shows how seeing differently can produce extraordinary changes to realize human and organizational potential. He is a masterful facilitator who intuitively changes direction based on the needs of client or audience as they emerge. Ron joins us today to discuss his latest book, Seeing True, 90 Contemplations in 90 Days. Ronald Chapman, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Kevin. Glad to be here.
Thank you so much for coming on and making the time for us today. I really do appreciate that. I've just been actually watching a few YouTube videos from prior conferences that you attended at the Ozark Mountain Publishing's conferences, just to get a flavour of what this work is about, you see, because in some respects it is a little bit different, as all books are. And as far as I understand, this is all about. Let me just get my notes together here. This is all about the seeing true transformational philosophy.
Yeah.
I think that's what we're going to try to focus on.
Sure enough.
What is, just before we go into a background of yourself, what is the seeing true transformational philosophy in just a few words?
Sure. Well, I'll go with the big word first, which is the Greek word metanoia, which literally means a profound change of heart. So what seeing true is a set of practices which help us see differently to produce a profound change within us, and therefore to change our lives, our behavior, all the things that matter to us. So that's the heart of it, Kevin.
Okay. We've just got a bit of context there then, and we can build on that. Okay. Now your book, Seeing True, 90 Contemplations in 90 Days. And is there actually 90 contemplations within the book?
Yes, there are. We made sure we counted that part correctly. Yes.
Right. So is this like a 90-day course then, in a sense?
Well, yeah, there's a lot of research that says if you start up a discipline and continue it for 90 days, some would argue a little less than that it actually can become habituated. And so the thinking behind this is to start up a contemplative practice, that if you play around with this book for 90 days, that you have a chance of continuing a contemplative practice to open oneself up to possibilities.
Okay. Well, just so what would someone, if someone's coming to see you, what are they going to get from your work, from this book, in a sense? Where would they need to be?
Yeah.
In their problems, maybe, or even if they don't have any problems, what would they get from this?
Sure. Well, just let me use a recent case example. I was someone had come to me through Shambhala Meditation Center here in Atlanta, where I live, and they were sort of stuck in their life, if you will, and trying to find a way to move forward, but they'd been having no luck. And so we use this kind of an approach, which is a contemplative approach, along with a breathwork approach, which was on my CD set from Ozark, my audio set. And what we essentially did was we explored in her body where she was stuck. She got some release at that place in her body as a result of poking and prodding. And before long, this actually took place over several sessions. She reported to me when I saw her just last week that she was really beginning to see some movement, and slowly but surely she's coming to grips with how she thinks she's stuck. But what we've literally got is movement in the body, somatic work they might call it. And so that's what we're interested in, is getting some movement from wherever someone might need either some release or some progress, or perhaps to better understand something they're struggling with.
And obviously, when whatever they're stuck with, you're giving them the power back to solve the issue themselves by, making it, seeing that problem more clearly, from before they came to see you, when they couldn't see it clearly, basically.
Yeah, very, very perceptive on your part. I mean, the basic proposition is we get stuck, we get blocked, we get barriers in the way. And with a little bit of illumination, a little bit of clarity, that those things can get out of the way, and then our natural state is restored, whatever that natural state may be. And so that's the underlying thinking, is let's see if we can get a look at where you're limited, where you're blocked off, and see if we can get some movement in it. Because the basic argument, Kevin, here is that you were designed to function. The basic design of life in you. And if you're not functioning well someplace, there's something standing in your way. So let's get a look at it.
And what makes you different to somebody else, the counselors or somebody else in the field of empowermental self-help? What's your niche, in a sense?
Well, it really has become increasingly this inquiry process. A lot of it is, I mean, it is inquiry-driven, question-driven. We explore. We especially use a lot of breath. There's actually a fair number of people beginning to use breath-type practices. I'm sure you've heard of EFT and emotional freedom technique, which is a tapping technique and so forth, because there was actually a guy named Reggie Ray, who's a renegade Buddhist, who said that the ancient wisdom of Tibet was that our awakening happens in the body with breath, with feeling. And so I'm unusual in that I'm practicing with somatic work in the body with breath and using the intellect to spur that process forward.
Okay, and I know I said I was going to get into your background. I am still, but let's just keep on this thread
Sure.
just right now. So this is a way for us to get answers. And when we go into the breath, which we'll talk about, what part of us are we connecting to then? Is it the intellect, or is that the part where the resistance is? Are we connecting with our feeling, where the true answers are?
Yeah, again, a really good question. What we're basically doing is we're bypassing the intellect. And the underlying thinking around that is that, around the age of 2, your conceptual capacity clicked into place, your intellect, your personality, and all of that, somewhere between 18 months and 30 months of age. And essentially what happens then is our thinking self begins to overtake ourselves. And essentially this remarkable fabric of sensory capacity, which you were born with, it's a genetic inheritance, picking up on subtle vibrations, being able to read things by paying attention to how it feels. Even the look, I mean, if you soften your gaze and watch people, you even begin to realize that you can pick a smile out of a softened gaze. All these things are hitting us, and yet we've blocked them off because of the formation of the intellect. So what we're trying to do is to reawaken this incredible web of sensory capacity that is basically working right now. I mean, the fact that you're breathing, the fact that you're upright, I mean, everything tells us that that this sensory capacity is operating, and we're just trying to tap that because it's been lost to many of us. And the breath and the inquiry has a chance to reawaken that in us.
And so we're not discarding logic here, neither are
Not
we?
at all. In fact, if you look at some of the really great work that's been done in the traumatic space, work with PTSD and so forth, what they're basically doing is they're using these kinds of techniques to bring things up out of our sensory selves. And what many would tell you is that they're trying to bring them into your thoughts so that you can then work with them in conscious intellectual framework. But we have to get them up so you can work on classic repressed things. In fact, if you talk with the people who do past life regression work, they're essentially saying the same thing, that if we can open up a space for something new to emerge, then we can bring it into your current adult cognitive functioning, and you can work with it to see what it means.
Right. Okay. So what by going into feeling then? Let's try to go beyond that then. What are we actually going into? Where is the feeling coming from if it's not us?
Well, I'm going to go Jungian on you now, because the basic idea that there is a collective unconscious, which again, some who do past life regression work would say that's what we're tapping into, is this collective held knowledge, this collective held wisdom, this collective held experience. And so one of the classic spiritual arguments is there a separate me, or am I just tapping into the collective? Is there only one with all these facets or aspects? And so what we're doing is, without knowing what it is, we're trying to tap it and see what it will provide for us.
Maybe there is only one. Maybe the consciousness we tap into is our higher self, which is the one, which is God, which is the I am, which is this inhibitive, undescribable ism that we can't put into words of source energy, that is all knowing and all loving. Maybe if we gave that power back to ourselves, and it might be quite empowering. But let's just
I'm right with you on that. And
Yeah,
And
yeah.
Kevin, what's been interesting as I've explored this space is how much people want to dither and argue and bicker over what it is and what it means. And I've kind of like set that aside because it's been remarkable. You work with atheists, humanists, Quakers, Jewish folk. I mean, I worked with a woman who's a Sufi, and clearly what they believe about it is not particularly important, except in the sense that we like what we believe in. So, yeah, the idea that there's only oneness, call it God, call it the source, call it the force, call it Tao, and what we're trying to do is to tap that and let it present itself. Interestingly, where that takes us is this idea of when you ask the question, so what are we tapping? Where are we going? Where does this come from? When we bypass the intellect, which thinks there's a Ron right here, all of a sudden I've tapped something else that is not Ron. And there's lots of evidence it will disclose all kinds of interesting things.
Yeah, you see the difference I think I'm coming with in this table. Maybe not new paradigm. Well, I know I'm going to call it a new paradigm. It's not really, but I'll say it is, because the idea that it is you are that source. And I only say that to actually self-empower people the highest possible way possible. Because when you say that the thinking behind that is, well, you are that source, you are God. It's so empowering and it's a bit too overpowering for some people. But it's I think that's the way that we should be going in a sense, and having that responsibility, and then all sorts of great stuff can come from that. Now most people aren't ready for that. They want to be told what to do, told what to think, blah 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 blah. I understand that. But that's just an offbeat, interesting part of the conversation there of where that feeling comes from. But that's interesting to have your take on that as well. So I appreciate you sharing
I could actually,
that.
if I understood you right, Kevin, I can go there with you. The challenge is that this thing that forms in us, around the age of 2, which they call it, differentiation that occurs in child development. And it really does at that moment be, apparently, as best we understand, in terms of development, is that we really do begin to see and sense ourselves as separate and apart from. And there's a really strong spiritual philosophical argument that says it's an illusion. We never were separate and apart. But still, if I like pick something up here, these sure feel like separate things to me, my finger in this audio set. So the appearance is a great challenge to us because it certainly looks like we're separate and apart. So I can actually go there with you. My mentor says, a guy I've been working with for 26 years now, spiritual mentor, says, this stuff is not for an unreduced ego. And what he means by that is that we'll latch onto it and try and put it to use when, in fact, you just said it, some of us are probably not ready for it yet.
No, we're not. But someone's got to wave the torch, and that's going to be me with this.
Good for you.
For definite. For definite. Well, as you mentioned the ego there. Now, the ego has no desire for you to see something different, as in your words as well.
Right.
And that's part of the, that must be a blockage when it comes to going into the feeling side as well.
Sure. Yeah. And ego is one of those words, or self, that people use a lot. And I use it in the context of this identity that I am separate and apart with, that I'm just this physical body, etc. And yeah, the attachment to the ego, especially the things that define us. For example, I seem to find myself over time working with a fair number of people who have a pretty strong victim identification. And once a person is convinced that they are being victimized, it can be really, really difficult to open that space up for them to see something other than being victimized. And so that's the kind of ways that our egoic attachments can get in the way. Because, honestly, Kevin, when you're walking the world thinking you're a victim, there's a whole lot of reason to believe the world is helping support you in that belief. And you, in fact, end up perhaps victimized simply because you're walking the world with that idea that you're a victim. So I got to tell you a funny story. I was doing this work with a guy in a coffee shop in Santa Fe a couple years ago. And he had a really attached, fixed belief that the world should not be trusted. So we're sitting there drinking coffee for like 90 minutes. And he suddenly realizes he wants to get some more coffee, and he gets up and he realizes he's lost his billfold. So he gets upset because it's like, oh my, I'm going to get ripped off. And he goes over, and his billfold has been setting on the coffee bar for 90 minutes untouched. And he comes back over, and I said, Don, what do you make of that? And he goes, oh, that was a fluke, because you can't trust the world. And it's like there was the evidence staring him in the face that in fact he had had a trust experience, but he could not consider the possibility because of his attachment to the untrustworthiness of the world. So it was a really good example.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Of course it is. Of course. But your work as well, the clients that you get to come see you, they must be so varied with their issues.
Yes, it runs the gamut. They've done, everything from domestic violence, substance abuse, people who are stuck in their careers, a guy who just made a major life course adjustment. And I freely refer some of them on to other professionals and other practices that seem like they might help them. I suppose we could honestly say that the challenges we face in life are as varied as we all are, right?
Yeah, absolutely, of course. So by going into so there's more than just the breathing in this
Sure.
in this work that you do, okay, but obviously the breathing is kind of key to a lot of it. If I can just breathing, relaxing, and breaking through.
Yes.
So with the breathing, is it kind of like would you say close to meditation? Or it can be?
Sure. Yeah. In fact, it's a 3 CDs, three set audio set, and there's everything in there from guided work to simple cadenced breathing, which is to actually practice with a rhythm. There are alternative breath practices. A lot of locating things in the body, trying to understand what you're feeling, not from the standpoint of labeling it with a feeling word, but understanding so for example, a woman I worked with, the feeling she came up with was that she had a feeling that felt in the pit of her stomach like ground glass. It's like, good. That's a really strong visual image that she was able to attach to work through some things she was working through. And what we can do, and in some cases I do this on the audio set and I do it in practice, is we can provoke things. For example, if let's say you're in the middle of some kind of a relationship breakdown, just by calling to memory one of your last conversations with your loved one, where you're experiencing the breakdown, will provoke feelings in the body, which then provide an entry point for beginning to explore them and reframing them to understand them.
Okay. No, obviously, I didn't mean to mention the CD set there. Actually, I didn't realize the CD set was called Breathing, Releasing, and Breakthrough. But of course it is. Of course it is. I got those words though from your website, but of course that's what the CD set's called as well. Now, is the CD set a complement to the book? Can you just get the CD set if you didn't want to get the book yet, or if you got both, is it better?
Yeah. Well, I guess it kind of depends. What happened was, since I do a lot of this practice in a lot of workshop settings, and someone came up one day and said, "Man, I need the workshop in a box," and I thought, "Man, I need to do a workshop in a box." So I actually designed this audio set so that you could go through the equivalent of 3 CDs. It's also available on iTunes, so you can download it to your iPod. I designed it so that a person could go through the whole practice. And interestingly, I've got reports from some study groups that have been using it as part of their study practice. They'll go through a few of the tracks, and then they'll stop and talk about what they're learning. I know that there are people who are just using it to develop their meditation practice. And then I've got one guy who I talked to just a couple weeks ago who actually uses it to help him get to sleep at night. And I kind of figure, well, whatever it works for, that's fine by me. But it was really designed to sort of give the whole workshop experience using breath, and it alternates between practices and cognitive work so we can kind of understand what's going on. And it works in complement for those who also like to do written or anything read. It's actually the two of them together are a nice complement, the book and the audio set. And then I've got people who just don't even want to go near the audio. They keep a copy of Seeing True on the nightstand, and they continue to journal in it over time.
That's really incredible. Yeah, because the book was it 2008?
Yeah,
I think it was.
Yeah, the book was,
yeah. Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
and it's gone through several printings now with Ozark. I'm not for a moment going to claim that it's reached anything like bestseller status, but it has been a really nice, steady. Whenever I do a workshop, and invariably when I work with clients, it becomes a resource that's available to them. For whatever purposes they think it might be useful.
Yeah, absolutely, and you know, I did have I've got the chapter list printed out.
Yeah.
But it's really something that you know we can't. I wouldn't bring this into the conversation too much now, because these chapters. How would you sort of say it? Yeah. How are the chapters laid out, and how's the book laid out in a sense with the journal side?
Sure. Well, as you said, there are 90 of them, and they have, you were observing as we were talking earlier, that the titles are not necessarily what they will read. So the title is intended to be provocative, and then I write it's a contemplation or a vignette, spiritual vignette, and it has a particular point of view. It shares some information that in many cases is challenging to what people believe. So that would be on the left-hand side. And then on the right-hand side, or I guess I should flip that around for people who are watching, but on the right-hand side, there are a few questions at the top that pick up a theme out of the vignette, out of the contemplation, and then there's space down the page to journal. Some of the best feedback I've gotten on its use has actually been people who set it on the nightstand and they just flip it open, and even if they've done the contemplation before, they will do it again. It's like, okay, let's see where I am now, and they can actually, Kevin, see movement in the fixedness of their perspectives, which is a pretty cool thing, to actually see yourself moving in terms of your beliefs and perceptions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've just I've got a few sentences here. Well, two. Well, not it's a sentence really. Yet the simple truth is, for every situation there are a number of useful and effective approaches. The secret is in choosing those which will fit well for your needs and circumstances.
Yeah. I'm anomalous in that way. My practice, the Seeing True. The reason I've come to this place is because, and I was alluding to some of this earlier, I have seen people of all kinds of faiths, denominations, perspectives, lack of belief, practice in all kinds of ways with meditation, with breath work, with tapping work, and at some point in time, if you're really honest with yourself as a guy who works in this space, you have to say to yourself, the most important thing is to find something that works for someone. So I oftentimes will have people say, well, should I get the book? Should I get the audio set? Should I get any of these other things that you've got out here? And what I'll really do is I'll chat with them for a little while to try and get an idea what might be useful. And honestly, in some cases, last time I was at the Ozark Mountain conference last year, I referred some people on to some other practitioners in there who I knew who were doing some good work that I thought would be more effective for what they were looking for. Because we should care more about the outcomes for people than we do care about a particular modality or a particular practice.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, do you see your work as being a healer then?
Yeah, I have such mixed feelings about that, because it connotes something that people make lots of assumptions about, and yet that does seem to be the space that I'm in. Which has included on some occasions, I had an older woman who was in one of my workshops, who she was breathing on some other deal, and when we did the debriefing and the conversation afterwards, she said, "This is the first time in years my hip has not hurt." I said, "Really?" And so, yeah, she had been breathing into something else, and whatever pain she was carrying in her hip, it resolved for her. Now, I don't know. I should probably keep, longitudinal studies on people, but the
That's
part I've come to
interesting.
really, really respect about this, call it, I think I'll call it the force for now. What I've really come to respect is when we create a space for it, it works with us in the way we need working with. And my task becomes really to sort of try and stay out of the way, to be a facilitator, or the equivalent of a midwife, I suppose, that you're just holding the space.
But that's a beautiful thing, though, because you're not being the guru for people to look up to, and not as in they become a junkie of the person that's trying to
Right.
help them, right?
Right.
They are their power.
Yes, yeah, and I just had a chill. Thank you for saying that, because yeah, I had a chill that ran up through me right now that was like I'm just paying attention to, is that it is so very easy, when you're working in healing spaces and helping other spaces. Well, in many places, it's so very easy to project yourself into the situation to make it about you. And of course, one of the things that's always interesting as I watch practitioners is I'm a pretty good student of this stuff, and I'm watching for the ones that are clearly looking to get the person hooked up to them, versus the ones on the other end of the continuum who are really just looking for a good experience for that client one time, and bless them, wish them well, and turn them loose, which seems like a more honorable practice to me.
Yeah, I agree with you, and it's taken time for me to get even to that thinking, to understand that process that this goes on, and it's by doing this show, I've come to realize that as well. I've come to realize a lot of things, to be honest with you, and yeah, it's powerful, isn't it, when you get to these points sometimes, like.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, and you're in the catbird seat on this, as they say. You're getting a chance to talk to all kinds of people about all kinds
Yeah.
of interesting things, and I can
Yeah.
already tell from your style you're a curious guy and a good thinker. So I would only imagine that you're tapping all kinds of things that you might not have even conceived of not so long ago.
Oh, definitely, 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 definitely. Yeah, especially the power that we individually have.
Hmm.
Most definitely, most definitely. But then if you didn't do what you're doing, then you wouldn't be there just to nudge people along, and you're of service to people, and that's really important as well. I do want to get into the corporate side of this, because I know that's kind of where it
Yeah,
started for you,
yeah,
in
yeah.
a sense. I know it's been important just to remain on the individual side, because
Yeah.
is that which side is more work right now for you, individual or organizations?
A little bit more on the organization side, where I spend, I don't know, probably 60%, 65% of my time. And it's actually I'm glad you asked, because it's actually one of my favorite subjects. You can see perhaps you can see the mischief in my eyes, because I don't for a moment profess to do spiritual work in organizations, because they don't hire me for that. But I know what we're doing this kind of work because the same principles, the principles work. One of the great pieces of mischief I discovered, and again, this was with the help of my mentor, um, is we make the mistake of trying to convert people over to our language and to our way of thinking, when in fact the higher service is to convert myself, my material, my content to their way of thinking in their language. So, for example, whereas I might be working with someone who's familiar with my work individually, and we're doing some spiritual healing, recovery kind of space, I might specifically talk about seeing true. I would much more likely in a 99.8% of the time in a corporate organizational setting, I might do a root cause analysis with them, which is language they're familiar with. And so it was just taught to me that we need to work with people where they are. And interestingly enough, that kind of puts a challenge on me to become familiar with everybody else's language so I can work in their vernacular.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
So
that's
please go ahead.
no, that's kind of quite a sort of chameleon ability to be able to, just be able to go in and go to their level as well. And what would you say is some of the sort of common root causes of corporate companies that you come across?
Oh boy, that is a superb question. There's a couple things that I come across very, very often. One is the inability to talk openly about what they need to talk about, which actually parallels breakdowns in primary relationships too, doesn't it? The we're not, we get a partner and we're not talking openly about things we need to talk about. So very, very, I mean, we would call it conflict aversion. I'm not happy with that phrase because I don't know that it's so much that we're averse to conflict is that we really don't know how to get some of these difficult things on the table so we can talk about them. So I spend a lot of time working with groups and leaders to figure out how to do that for themselves and in their cultures. And of course, another thing that comes up very, very commonly is, broadly it would be referred to be in the strategic world. But I would again use a little different language for our purposes. It's not so much about strategy as it is about getting very, very clear on what your priorities are, which tends to be very, very difficult for many organizations, especially in the world we're in today, where there's so much coming at people all day long. So those are probably the two I spend most of my time in. And then what it invariably spins off into is a lot of what is formally called coaching in the world, where we actually sit down, one-on-one or one-on-two if I'm helping debug a workplace relationship, where we try and understand where they're going off the rails, which is actually the same kind of work I do with the Seeing True practice. It's just, it's a modified approach that's more appropriate to their setting. I would compare something here because I have a suspicion about you from listening to you and your questions and some of the things you've said. My suspicion is you're a really good student of lots of things, which is exactly how I've learned how to play in other people's spaces is, you're talking to somebody and their angle is whatever it is. Someone comes to you and they say, we're using the good to great framework to build organization. It's like, okay, cool. I'll go learn that because that sounds really interesting to me. And the next thing you know, I can work with people who want to work in that approach. And over time, just as you were describing for yourself, you collect all these interesting approaches and perspectives, and they're all really useful.
I think my biggest problem is I've not been able to center myself on what it is I really want to do, and my thing's always been about I want to make the money, I want to do the money, and really I've come to learn primarily from this work that's secondary. That will come once you're in alignment with what you really love to do and what your purpose is, and it's finding that space. And sometimes we're tested in so many ways that you may have found that space, yet there's so many other options around you that you could do. Which one do you go for? Do you go for that space that you found, that calling, or are these other things that you should be doing first? And I think I'm just in that arena right now of just not being 100% centered and knowing which way it's going, or trying to go with the flow as well.
Sure. I was just talking to somebody about this just yesterday about, we were talking about life course, life path, all that stuff. And the truth of the matter is that it's almost like you have to feel your way through your path. In fact, I'm fond of I have a novel coming out this fall. And there's a phrase in there in particular that is, the path is made with every step. That in terms of what you're doing with even your show right here, this interview, this conversation is one step along the path, and you won't necessarily know what the next step is until 30 minutes from now, your next interview, tomorrow morning when you wake up. And so we keep trying to feel our way through, which is why I think that whole somatic experiential space is so important, because we can't cognitively figure it out. I went through a period where I was asking people, older folks who were at or near retirement, how their path had unfolded, how they found it, and it's like, I mean, my goodness, it's capricious and unpredictable. You just don't ever know when something is suddenly going to click and off you go. So a piece of this broader body of work, and even your exploration, is trying to get tuned into that. And if you're cursed with multiple things you could do, or blessed if you prefer, it makes it all that much harder, doesn't it?
It does, and maybe those tests are there for a reason. That's the one way of looking for it. But I think this all comes down to what your work is all about, in a sense. I know I'm not trying to say it's equal to this, but just some coreness of it is feeling, which we were saying earlier on. What feels right?
Yeah.
That's your soul. That's your higher self talking to you. That's the all-knowing part of you that just knows, and it's trusting that. And I think really, that's our biggest issue. A lot of us, we don't trust. Well, yeah, we don't trust it, do we? We think
we have learned to trust this up here, and this is perfect, Kevin. I was just doing this work last week with a woman who it was a mixture of all these things we're talking about. And at one moment, we prodded a particular thing. She was struggling because all of a sudden she's overwhelmed with her work. She runs a small business and it pays her well and all that. But she could feel from what has now become about 60, 65, 70% of her work caused her to get somewhere deep in her belly, caused her to get a real sense of queasiness. And then we talked about something else, and like this look came to her face, and I said, "What just happened?" She goes, "Man, there's this really light feeling up here above my heart." And I said, "Oh, well, let's explore that." And so exactly what you said, what we found out with her was that she can pretty much 100% trust that feeling. When that feeling shows up here, she's tracking on something. And so what we're now teaching her is how to increase her awareness of that feeling. What I think we're going to end up doing is we'll bring it into cognition so we can work with it intellectually. But for now, we're just teaching her to learn to, as you said, trust that feeling, because it's a very clear one. And we actually regressed her a little bit. And this was really cool. She was able to go back using the feeling, Kevin, and remember particular episodes back in her life that were particularly fulfilling, and the feeling was the constant in them. So you're right, and yet we've been taught, essentially to use cognition for our decision making, and it has a place. But man, those feelings they're very reliable.
Yes, and would you say that staying present is a big part of your work as well?
Yeah. Well, especially because if you're going to tune into whatever your somatic experiential body is telling you, it is an awareness exercise. Just like what happened to me a minute ago. I still remember the first time. I still remember the first time, and it was a feeling very similar to the one I just described a moment ago when you asked the question you asked. Is something just shot up, and I was paying enough attention where I go like, wow, what was that? And it turns out those feelings have probably been with me all the while, my entire life, but I had completely tuned them out.
Are they shots of truth? I don't know.
Well, I'm hard pressed to explain, but even now as I talk about it, my earliest recollection of that feeling, which I'm feeling right now just by recalling, is I was about 2 years old, and I was sitting on the curb in front of my house, and I was just watching ants, a trail of ants. And it was a sunny day, and I was just. It was perfect. It was just perfect. I was full of that oneness, perhaps. And it's the earliest recollection I have of that feeling that I get that takes me all the way back. And it's proven to be a really reliable feeling.
Well, there you go. Yeah, that's surprising to go back that far, isn't it?
Well, it surprised. I was actually doing a meditative practice. At one point, I was working with deep meditation and journaling, where I'd meditate and then journal. And I dropped into this space, and there it was. The guy who was working with me on this had told me not to discount things, because what'll happen is your intellect will say, oh well, that can't be, or that's obviously made up, or it's a fantasy. And he really taught me. It's like, no, just like you would with I don't know if you've ever done captured your dreams, dream journaling, yeah, same sort of deal. It's like there's stuff going on in there, and some of it's very, very meaningful if we will tune into it.
Well, I had a guy on about dreams the other day, and my understanding of this work now, the dreams, for us, it's just another way of your higher self trying to get in without telling you what to do, because then we don't need dictating to, because it doesn't want to. It's not about that. It's about us choosing ourselves and just giving little hints sometimes.
I started. I've been absent from actual therapeutic space with a therapist for a while, and on the urging of my longtime mentor, I took up with a Jungian analyst not too long ago, and we've been spending a lot of time poking around at these dreams and all this murky stuff, and man, Kevin, some of the stuff that has come out of it has just, it's been game-changing stuff. It's remarkable what's floating around in there, but we do have to play with it a bit to figure out what's there and what it might mean.
Oh yes, I think for us to get direct answers to say this is going to happen or you're going to do this, I don't think we would. If life does continue and that the consciousness is separate and it's there is a bigger picture, then it's we're not this is our movie. It's up to us to create it. We're not going to get someone from the outside to say, well, this is what's going to happen. So maybe where would love come from in that space? It would maybe give hints, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I absolutely am comfortable with that idea. I've had enough of an experience now, especially like even the non-dream space of like the example I shared about going back to the curb, or at one point I had a memory come up from when I was about 5 that actually had a strong sexual content to it, and so I had to go do some family research to find out what was going on about then, and it turned out that it'd been a really shameful experience with a little girl from next door. We were innocently playing doctor and got caught, and I was surprised because I didn't realize that something so innocent as that, which was actually not handled badly by the adults. I really had no idea how much that had infused me in terms of my sexuality, and yet there it was, just waiting to be discovered.
Yeah. And, well, you won't. Yeah, but you won't be the only one that can relate to that. I think a lot of people can relate to that. They'll never talk about it. Yeah. But thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, it was. And actually, I'll tell you what it was. It was all that came to me. It was trippy. It was in a meditation, some therapeutic guided meditation. And all that came to me was a hand coming around a door. Was all there was, and it was sexually charged. And it's like, God, what happened? Did I get what? And anyway, it took a fair amount of embarrassed exploration to put the pieces together. But if you've spent much, not knowing who all you've interviewed from Ozark, but as soon as you start going into things like the Akashic record and so forth, there are a lot of people who would tell you that nothing is ever lost. That it is imprinted deep within us, and we may not be able to readily access it. But it's like there's a record of everything that's happened.
Everything, yeah. And I hope so for Dolores Cannon as well. I'm sure she's continued and doing her work. Where she is now. It's funny because I just saw a video of her at the last conference, because you were there with her.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it just brought back a few memories of when I met her before. And yeah, it's great that you guys crossed paths, and she really supported the work that you do as well.
She did. I was very unusual. You know, much of their work is really in the what I mean. I don't. It's so broad, but I mean, it works pretty much in the certainly the non-intellectual realm, the transpersonal. I mean, and they took a little bit of a leap of faith on me because they'd never seen anything like this. And then so too with the audio set, and they've told me they're going to do another audio set for me this September, called The Way of Spirit. And so I don't fit with a large part of their profile,
But you do, though, in a sense. After having this conversation with you, you know, you're reaching people on a broader level, in a sense, that may not be looking for the complete, as you say, in spiritual sense, and you're easing them into your understanding of feelings and of being true to themselves and of the healing work that you do. So I kind of do see the connections.
well, good. One of the funniest things, because I usually, when I'm at the Transformation Conference, I usually set up a table and do some breath work and hang out with people and whatever that comes to me. And one of the hardest things that I actually have to work with there, because there's normally some readers and tarot and a number of things there. And a fair number of people is exactly what you said earlier. They're looking for me to do them, right? They're looking for me to give them the answers. And I think that's malpractice for my purposes. Consistent with what you have been saying, Kevin. What I really want them to do is to draw it from themselves. And more importantly, and something you said is right on the mark, as soon as you start becoming attached to someone else giving you your reading and telling you what it means for you, you stop inquiring. You stop looking for it within yourself. And I guess the reason that matters is let's take the difference between learning how to take a portable breathwork practice with you. Learn the practice and then take it with you, versus needing a reader. Well, if you can get a portable practice, then you have access to what you need all the time, as opposed to if you need a reader or some other practice, you need them. And so I kind of feel like it's, as I said earlier, higher service to empower people to have their own solutions rather than to be dependent on someone giving them their solutions.
Yes, and I do think, though, that still, that when it comes to readers or psychics and stuff like that, that everyone serves a purpose, and it's when it becomes addictive.
Yes,
that's my thing with it. I've no other issue with it whatsoever. I mean, I see, I go see a psychic, once a year, maybe twice a year tops, yeah, and that's just to get a little top up, maybe, or just to see where, just to curiosity and just to see what's going on. It's always nice, but would I keep going back for every answer? Then of course not. But
right.
This does happen.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, the best. I've hung out with some interesting people of all types, and the ones that it has seemed to work the most are the ones that their goal is not to create a dependency. Clearly, what they want to do is they're happy to channel or whatever they do, but their goal is to empower you to use this to something that's useful for you.
Yeah. I think that's where the paradigm's shifting to as well. Do you know what? I really do. Okay, I can't believe we're getting close to the end here.
That was a fast 50 minutes or so, wasn't it?
I know, right? Now, normally I would start the conversations off with, tell us a bit about yourself and everything else. But in this sense, it was just interesting to get straight into the work. But, you have lived, your teachings in a sense. You never had it easy when you grew up. And I think, well, not so much grew up, but as you, in your early life, you had to go through many dark times, didn't you, to get to the point you've got to now?
Yeah, I'm most of my practices. I mean, thank goodness for all the teachers and healers and therapists and coaches and mentors. But I'm self-taught with a lot of this. I do have I have a master's degree in social welfare, but really much of this is from its original inception. I went through a very dark period where it was extraordinarily bleak, and honestly, there are times, Kevin, I wonder how I came out of it. It was very dark, and at that point, it was at that point that my life had really sort of collapsed around me. And so, for all these many years, 30 plus years now, I've been exploring all of these things. And my original motivation was I needed some answers. So first and foremost, I consider myself a very, very good student. But if we're really honest, I'm not a virtuous student. I was a student of necessity, and that just means that I care a lot about this stuff because it's been game changing, life changing stuff.
Absolutely,
for me.
and honesty again. You're true to you've lived it. What text has influenced you? I know that you liked A Course in Miracles, but was there others?
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I mean, A Course in Miracles is one that was very influential. I have been very influenced by Gurdjieff, The Fourth Way. Have studied Maurice Nicole, Brit who was writing much of his commentaries back in the 40s. I've studied, he was a student of Gurdjieff in The Fourth Way, and I have studied him extensively. My original underpinnings were sort of evangelical Christian, although I've left much of that behind. The parts I held on to were the mystical Christians. I did study Yogananda for a pretty fair period, and there was another guy. He's a little bit out of the Gurdjieff lineage, a guy by the name of Rondell, who created some really, really practical guides. So much of this stuff is out in the ether, right? And what people need is like, tell me how to do this deal. So he created a 48-week study program, that I ended up doing, I don't know, 6 or 7 times. And so what I've sort of pulled together is all of that has sort of come together through my practice, seen true, and it's a pretty cool deal.
No, there's some great stuff you've just mentioned there, and it's surprising actually. Some of the ones you've mentioned are quite dated in a sense, but some of the older stuff a lot of people have not come across in the 40s and the 30s. Was really good spiritual stuff, and there are some websites out there where you can dig up these old books that have been put into electronic format because a lot of them went out of print.
Oh yeah, Maurice Nicole's stuff. Another one I didn't mention but studied at length. Joel Goldsmith. Some think the greatest American mystic. And much of this stuff, you're right, it is remarkable. I went looking for some of Gurdjieff's stuff just recently. It was dumbfounded that stuff has been scanned in, and literally it's page after page after page, and from stuff that was written. I think that stuff was published in 1945.
Yeah,
46,
I think it's free now. I think it's free to the public. I think anyone can recopy it. I'm pretty sure it got that. Yeah. Just thank you for sharing that, and just talking about books as well. Where would people get your book from? And also you've got a few websites. So just if we could just have the websites as well, please.
Yeah. So the main one, we actually just relaunched it, that has much of this there, is seeingtrue.com, www.seeingtrue.com. Where, since we've relaunched it, there's going to be a whole bunch more fresh material coming, blogs, vlogs, interviews, a number of things. So that's the primary purveyor of this. The materials are pretty much all available from Amazon, and so easily tracked down there. That's good, because then Ozark makes some money on them, and that's good because Ozark's doing cool stuff. I also have another site for those who are in the recovering world, the 12-step recovering world, called progressiverecovery.org, which is relatively new, but we're building out content there. And then my primary professional site is called magneticnorthllc.com, where I'm doing a lot of what would be considered my corporate world work.
Okay, so yeah, that's your limited liability company in America that you do the corporate. Okay.
Yes.
Well, we've been flashing those web addresses up on the screen, and if people want to get do you do Skype sessions? Yeah.
I do. Yeah, I sure do.
Yeah.
Yeah, they can.
No, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yeah, they can reach me on Skype, and I can never remember it. Ron.Chapman505. And they can track me down, and I'm happy to chat with people. And I guess I'll say the one thing that really pleases me is I never have any idea what I'm going to do with anyone. I just sort of open it with a spirit of willingness and curiosity, and we see where we go with it.
What would you say then is one of the most important messages you give to this audience in regards to your work?
That if you're not getting some movement, you haven't yet seen how it is you're blocked or stopped. And to stop looking for the solution and turn your attention to understanding where you're hooked, where you're stuck. Because my experience over and over again, and the Jungians would agree with this, as soon as you bring that shadow into the light, things begin to move, and so it's the exploration that I found to be extraordinarily valuable.
Right, again, a completely different way of looking at it, which I absolutely love. So all I'm going to say is it's been a fantastic interview. I have really enjoyed this, actually. And Ron Chapman, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's a real pleasure. That's a great deal of fun, Kevin. Thank you.
Well, we've come to an end on tonight's show. Don't forget that you can listen and watch all our past interviews on the More Show's official YouTube channel. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for new daily shows. You may also find out more on all past and upcoming guests on the show via themoreshow.co.uk, and do like us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates. So until next time, be safe.